The air of Alexandria reeked of incense and salt water, as the Nile kissed the Mediterranean with ancient memory. Beneath the marble pillars and the screaming gulls of Egypt's last great city, secrets stirred in the earth, some whispered by stone, others drowned by centuries of conquest and flame. Among those secrets, none had captivated the minds of scholars, dreamers, and thieves more than the final resting place of Cleopatra VII Philopator, the last queen of Egypt. They said she died with her lover, Mark Antony, in a palace built for gods. They said her tomb had golden lions, ivory statues of Isis, and walls carved with spells that could summon storms. They said Octavian, the cold victor of Rome, buried her where none would find her again. But they were all only saying. No one had found her. No one could find her. Until now, Dr. Amira Rashad had never been prone to romanticism. A trained Egyptologist, born in Giza but educated at Oxford, she approached history with a scalpel rather than a brush. She knew how Egypt seduced minds, how its riddles swallowed scholars whole. But when the anonymous parcel arrived at her Cairo apartment wrapped in linen and sealed with a wax scarab, her hand trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a letter written in Coptic on parchment so dry it crackled. The script was angular and precise, yet inked with haste. Attached was a rough sketch of what looked like an underground chamber. Carved into one corner was the unmistakable symbol of Cleopatra, her cartouche, bearing the image of a coiled cobra flanked by twin moons. And at the bottom, a single line in Latin, Sub templo Isidis, in spicu maris, hoc est regini somnus. Under the temple of Isis, in a cave by the sea, this is the queen's sleep. That was the moment the queen of Egypt whispered to Amira through the veil of time. The temple of Isis once stood tall at Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria. It was a place whispered about more than documented. A sanctuary where Cleopatra was said to have worshipped the goddess she claimed as her divine mother. Historians had debated for years whether the queen would dare choose such a place for burial. But now the letter, along with the cartouche, suggested more than a theory. It implied a deliberate act, a queen's final deception. 3 days after receiving the letter, Dr. Rashad stood at the edge of the marshlands flanking the ruins of Taposiris Magna. With her was her longtime associate Leo Durham, an archaeologist from Boston with a reckless streak and an obsession with the Ptolemaic dynasty. "This place isn't just half drowned," Leo muttered as his boots sank ankle-deep into sludge. "It's cursed." Dr. Rashad ignored him. Cleopatra was an illusionist in life. Why not in death? They walked along the ruined wall of the sanctuary, the late afternoon sun baking the earth into cracked parchment. Much of the original temple was in ruins. Collapsed columns, fragments of Osirian reliefs, jackal statues with missing jaws. But it was the foundation they cared about. Not what rose above, but what had sunken below. The Coptic map marked an entrance not far from the northernmost pylon. They found it just before sunset. A slab of stone oddly out of alignment, its edges clean where erosion should have worn them smooth. "Sealed deliberately," Leo said. "This isn't part of any known excavation." Dr. Rashad's breath slowed. "We need to dig." They didn't wait for permits. History, after all, rarely asked for permission. The shaft beneath the stone was narrow, barely wide enough for one person at a time, and it led steeply down, not into the temple's basement, but under the ancient bedrock. The passage was dry, oddly preserved, with stone walls bearing faded hieroglyphs and depictions of Anubis guarding a sleeping woman with a diadem. When their lanterns caught the first glint of gold, a sun disk embedded in a wall mural, they stopped. Leo exhaled. "That's her. That's her face." Cleopatra's profile had been rendered with stylized grace. The hooked nose, the almond eyes lined with kohl, the vulture crown of Upper Egypt clasping her brow. And behind her, Isis stood with outstretched wings, holding an ankh in one hand and a lotus in the other. They moved forward. The passage opened into a chamber sealed by twin doors of black basalt, covered in Greek and Demotic script. The seals were Roman, definitely posthumous. Octavian, Amira whispered. He didn't just want her hidden. He wanted her erased. Too bad for him, Leo grinned. They broke the seal. Inside was a staircase spiraling down, and at the bottom, darkness. The lower chamber reeked of salt. Not dampness, but the bone-dry scent of sea air that had once flowed freely but was now entombed. The air buzzed with a silence that made their breathing sound criminal. Every step they took echoed as though walking inside a ribcage. At the center of the chamber was an altar of white limestone, shaped like a lotus blossom, and upon it a sarcophagus, not gilded, not encrusted with gems. Simple, black granite. Its lid bore one carving, a cobra curled over a crescent moon. Dr. Rashad approached slowly. She ran her gloved fingers along the edge. "The stone," she murmured. "It's Nabatean, imported, possibly stolen." Leo knelt beside her. "You think this is it?" "I think," she paused, voice almost breaking. "I think we're standing before the woman who defied two empires." They opened the lid. Inside was a cocoon of gold-threaded linen. No body, only bones, elegant, small, and oddly intact. But it was what lay in the queen's hand that made both archaeologists go still. A ring, engraved with a double-headed eagle and a Latin inscription. Antonius et Cleopatra, unum corpus. One body. Before they could document further, the chamber's air shifted. A gust, not from outside, but from the walls, rattled dust from cracks in the ceiling. Leo stepped back, his light catching something behind the altar. A carved warning, etched hastily, in Coptic and Greek. To disturb her is to awaken the hunger of the dead. She is the gate. Close it or be consumed. Dr. Rashad's breath caught in her throat. The air had changed again, cold, and from the tunnel behind them came a sound like whispered weeping. Something was in the dark. Leo swung his light around. "We should leave," but Amira didn't move. She stared at the bones in the sarcophagus, at the hand still holding the ring, and whispered, "She's not sleeping." Dr. Amira Rashad had always believed in signs, though she rarely admitted it. As she and Leo backed away from the sarcophagus, the eerie echo of unseen weeping followed them like the breath of a tomb left ajar too long. The warning inscribed on the chamber wall throbbed in her mind. She is the gate. They were standing in something far more than a burial vault. The moment the lid opened, something ancient, something protective had stirred. "What do we do?" Leo asked, his whisper bouncing off the curved walls like a prayer left unanswered. Amira hesitated, staring at the figure of Cleopatra now revealed in death. Small bones, delicate wrists, and yet surrounded by inscriptions that declared power beyond comprehension. The walls behind the altar were decorated in two languages, Greek and Demotic, both carved in haste, perhaps by different hands. The Demotic text bore familiar names, Isis, Osiris, the journey through Duat. But the Greek words told a story, one that had never appeared in any scroll or manuscript. Here lies Cleopatra Theophilopater, beloved of Isis, queen of the double crown. Let no man sunder her sleep, for in her rest she guards the veil between the living and the drowned. Amira touched the inscription with trembling fingers. "This isn't just a tomb." Leo looked over, the flashlight trembling slightly in his grasp. "What then?" "It's a seal," she said. "A capstone, prison, or maybe a lock." Back on the surface under the crescent moon, they sat on the crumbling steps of the ruined temple, the air thick with dust and ancient pollen. Neither of them spoke for some time. Then Amira produced a second item from the parcel that had arrived days before, the one she'd not shown Leo. A brittle scroll in Latin, its ink faded but still legible. She read aloud, "Let it be known that the queen is entombed in the mouth of the Dead Sea, at the shrine of her false divinity. Let no record endure. Let the priest scatter. Let the earth forget. Thus shall Rome's wrath be final." Leo leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "That's from Octavian?" Amira nodded. "Or one of his scribes. It was meant to be destroyed, but someone saved it. Maybe one of Cleopatra's loyalists. Someone who wanted the truth preserved, but buried." So the tomb's location was known only to a handful of Roman and Egyptian loyalists, and erased from record deliberately. But why all the mysticism? Leo asked. Why the warnings, the seal, the ritualistic death chamber? Amira interjected. Because they weren't just burying a queen. They were burying something else. Leo blinked. You think she wasn't entirely human? No, Amira said quietly. I think she died, but she didn't pass. They returned to the tomb on the second night, armed with equipment, cameras, oxygen tanks, and a quiet sense of dread. The stairs had shifted slightly. The air was heavier. The weeping sound was gone, replaced by something worse. Silence. And when they descended, they discovered something else had changed. The sarcophagus was closed. I didn't close it, Leo said quickly. Neither did I, Amira replied. She approached the altar again, this time careful to scan the surrounding stone. Carvings had appeared where there had been none before. New glyphs, fresh inscriptions. They were still wet. One depicted a boat sailing backward through a black river. Another showed a woman's face split in half, one side regal, the other skeletal. But it was the final glyph that chilled Amira most. A doorway filled with flame, and beyond it, a great figure rising from waves of ink. Not Isis, she murmured. Not Osiris. Then who? Amira turned slowly. Nehebko. Leo paled. The devourer of souls? The guardian of Duat, she said. Cleopatra wasn't entombed here to preserve her memory. She was placed here to hold something at bay. Their third and final visit to the tomb was unplanned. That night, Amira awoke to screams echoing from her satellite phone. It was a call from the guard posted at Taposiris Magna, someone she had hired to ensure the site remained undisturbed while she prepared to file a formal report with the Ministry of Antiquities. The man had barely gotten 3 words out before the line cut to static. She and Leo rushed to the site at dawn. What they found was ruin. The entrance to the shaft had collapsed. The northern pylon wall had caved in. And on the edge of the ruins, they found the guard's body, his face frozen in terror, his skin covered in salt like he'd been pulled from the sea. Leo whispered, "Whatever was in there, it didn't want us to leave." Amira fell to her knees. "We woke it." Weeks passed. The Egyptian authorities sealed off the area. Rumors spread of a sinkhole and unauthorized digging. No mention was made of Cleopatra. No artifacts were listed in the reports. But Amira had kept one thing. Hidden in her satchel was a stone tablet she'd pried from the base of the altar. A fragment covered in 3 languages. Demotic, Latin, and something older. Something untranslatable. The Demotic and Latin were clear. To whomever finds this, know that the queen did not die for Rome. She died for the world. The ocean beneath Egypt holds more than history. It holds the end. Let her sleep. Amira closed her journal and looked out over the Mediterranean from her apartment balcony in Cairo. She no longer searched for Cleopatra. She prayed no one else ever would. In the bustling Roman port of Ostia Antica, nearly 40 years after Cleopatra's death, the Mediterranean Empire stood taller than it ever had. Marble statues of Augustus lined colonnaded forums. Poets drank wine at dusk while scribes copied imperial edicts by lamplight. But in the cluttered corner of an underground library known only to a few, a man named Marcus Verinius Calvus unwrapped a scroll that could unmake all of it. Marcus was no common scholar. Once a tribune in Octavian's army, he had served in Egypt during the occupation. He had been present, silent and ordered, on the day they buried the queen, and he had never spoken of it since. But in his late years, plagued by illness and dreams of drowning, Marcus returned to the scroll he had hidden beneath the temple of Vesta decades ago. His hand shook as he read what he himself had written in his youth. "We sealed her under the shrine at the edge of the world. She was not dead in the Roman sense. Her body had no decay. Her eyes had closed, but not from sleep. And when we lowered her, the air bled. We should not have entered. We should not have seen." He paused, coughing blood into a cloth. Then he lit a candle and began writing again. Not far from where Marcus wrote his final warnings, a young historian named Lucilla Emilia was conducting research for a patron who desired to chronicle Egypt's fall in detail. Lucilla was 24, fiercely intelligent, and doubly cursed. Roman by blood but Alexandrian by birth. Her father had been a Roman procurator in Alexandria. Her mother, an Egyptian scribe who died mysteriously during a temple fire near Taposiris Magna when Lucilla was a child. The temple of Isis, Lucilla knew, had been closed shortly after that fire, officially due to pagan defiance. Unofficially, well, no one talked about what was found in the Western crypt. While combing the underfloor archives of Ostia's forbidden scroll chamber, known as the Nocturnum Tabularium, Lucilla discovered Marcus Calvus's scroll sealed in oilskin. She read it in silence for 2 hours, then reread it again. She didn't sleep that night. Weeks later, Lucilla stood aboard a grain ship bound for Alexandria. Her patron had warned her, "Don't stir the sand. Egypt remembers." She went anyway. On the voyage, Lucilla reviewed every known record of Cleopatra's death. Plutarch's biography, with its poetic overtones, painted the queen's suicide with the color of tragedy, but no substance. Roman court records stated she had been buried quickly, without ceremony, in a suitable royal crypt. The actual location had never been declared. But Marcus's scroll told a different story. One of a chamber deeper than any known catacomb. One with basalt seals marked with both Roman eagle and Egyptian cobra. One that howled when opened. Upon arrival in Alexandria, Lucilla avoided the Roman garrison and slipped out to the ruins west of the city. The temple of Isis at Taposiris Magna had become a place of superstition. Locals avoided it. Farmers claimed their livestock would not graze near it. Travelers said they heard voices under the earth. But Lucilla, cloaked, silent, walked straight to the fallen pylon where, according to the scroll, the hidden shaft began. She found the stone, still unnaturally clean, unmarked by time. But someone had tried to seal it again with fresh masonry, Roman in style but hasty, as though it had been reopened in recent memory. She lit her torch and descended. The descent was not steep, but disorienting. The walls curved inward, covered in symbology. Greek words spiraling around Egyptian gods, as if two cultures were wrestling for ownership of the tomb. The antechamber held signs of intrusion. Broken pottery, torn parchment, even a fallen Roman gladius rusted to its hilt. But the seals ahead, those described in Marcus's scroll, remained untouched. Twin doors of black basalt, the cobra and eagle, the gate. Lucilla pressed her hand to the stone. It was warm. A whisper, not quite sound but more than imagination, brushed her mind. She is the gate. Lucilla turned to leave, but something, curiosity, pride, perhaps inherited madness, froze her. Instead, she knelt, retrieved her stylus, and began copying every inscription on the basalt doors, because what she read shouldn't exist. The central inscription was written in Greek, Latin, and something older, cuneiform script that had no place in Ptolemaic Egypt. As Lucilla deciphered it, her breath shallowed. It was not an epitaph. It was a prophecy. When Rome's light burns highest, and the queen's rest is shattered, the waters shall rise and devour memory. For she is not only the mother of nations, but the vessel of hunger. And beneath that, a final line, if you wake her, run. Lucilla dropped her stylus. Behind her, the antechamber grew colder. The air changed. The weeping began. Lucilla's torch flickered violently as the chill air swept across the chamber. Her fingers trembled as she retrieved her scrolls, and for a long moment she simply stared at the twin basalt doors, sealed, ancient, and humming with an energy that made the marrow in her bones ache. The weeping didn't echo like sound normally would in a stone vault. It rippled, as if surfacing from a deeper place, one beneath time and matter. It wasn't grief. It was warning. Lucilla backed away from the door, her legs aching with strain. The whispers rose with every step. She reached the stair and began the climb, dragging her satchel of notes and rubbings behind her. When she broke through to moonlight at last, she collapsed to her knees in the sands above. In the sky, the stars shimmered unnaturally. She didn't know it then, but the act of transcribing the prophecy, the act of seeing it, had already begun the unraveling. Back in Alexandria, Lucilla sought out the library's hidden subarchives, those untouched by Roman censors, still maintained by old Egyptian families who had served as keepers of secret texts since the time of the pharaohs. She presented the rubbings and inscriptions to an old man named Khemu, a blind archivist who wore a jackal-tooth pendant and whose memory was longer than his years. When he touched the basalt rubbings, his fingers jerked back as though burned. "Put these away," he hissed. "You know this script?" Lucilla asked. "I know of it," Khemu said. "It is not Coptic, not Demotic. It is Sinare, the tongue of the twilight temples, the speech of the royal bloodlines before even Menes." Lucilla leaned forward. "What does it say?" Khemu shook his head. "It says, she was crowned in blood. She will rise in salt, and Rome will drown in the sea that remembers." Lucilla's blood ran cold. "But it's just a tomb," she said weakly. Khemu touched her arm. "No, child. It is a mouth, and it is hungry." 2 nights later, a quake rocked the coast of Alexandria. At first, it was believed to be minor, just the groaning of Egypt's tectonic slumber. But local fishermen saw something that didn't fit the pattern. A portion of land near Taposiris Magna had collapsed. A sinkhole nearly 20 feet across yawned where no fault lines ran. And from the hole, a sound could be heard. The deep, groaning breath of something inhaling. Lucilla rushed back to the site. The basalt doors were now cracked. A fine mist crept up through the shaft, the air tasting of metal and brine. The weeping was louder. Lucilla didn't dare enter. She sat by the edge of the sinkhole for hours, sketching, listening, writing. And when she returned to the city, she began a journal, not of findings, but of visions. Visions that had started after she left the tomb. Lucilla began dreaming of water, not seas or rivers, but a black ocean filled with shrines of coral and bone. In her sleep, she walked among columns carved with faces, one of them her own. She saw a throne made of vertebrae and a figure seated upon it, veiled in green silk, weeping. When she approached the figure, the woman lifted her veil. It was Cleopatra, but not as statues had shown her. Not the regal, painted beauty of Rome's enemy queen. Her skin shimmered like obsidian. Her eyes were as deep as the Nile at night, and in her mouth, rows of teeth too sharp, too many. "Do you wish to rule?" Cleopatra asked.
"No," Lucilla whispered.
"Then run." Lucilla awoke screaming, and in her bed, the sheets were wet, not with sweat but salt water. Lucilla sent word to her patron in Rome. an encoded message urging the cessation of her project and a plea to suppress her findings. But days passed. No reply. Then a ship arrived from Ostia, a merchant vessel, its crew shaken. They spoke of madness in the capital, a fire at the temple of Jupiter, sudden storms that lashed the Tiber, and an entire cohort of priests who had vanished during a nighttime rite. Lucilla knew it was spreading. Something had shifted. The gate was open. Lucilla returned to the temple one last time. She brought wax tablets, ancient sealing resins, and a company of mute monks from the monastery of St. Minas, men who believed not in scripture, but in song. As they chanted the old hymns of Isis, she descended with her tools and, for the final time, sealed the basalt gate with molten obsidian and ash from a burned scroll of Augustus. She carved a final line into the stone above the seal. Let none seek her. Let none speak her name. The queen lies beyond breath, and she does not forgive. When Lucilla emerged, her hair had gone white. She never spoke again, but her journal remained hidden for centuries, until it reached a woman named Dr. Amira Rashad, in a sealed box, wrapped in linen, bearing a single phrase in Latin, Hoc est regni somnis. This is the Queen's sleep. In the fall of 2024, an international team of archaeologists, funded by a consortium of European universities and private sponsors, arrived in Egypt under the banner of cultural preservation. Their mission was, officially, to explore unexcavated ruins along the coastal outskirts of Alexandria, including the largely ignored site of Taposiris Magna. But among them was Professor Vincent Moreau, a French Egyptologist with a peculiar interest in lost funerary rites. Quiet, fastidious, and deeply obsessed with pre-Ptolemaic ritual culture, he had lobbied for this project for nearly a decade. What no one knew, not even his own team, was that Moreau had acquired fragments of Lucilla Imilia's forbidden journal, passed down through a clandestine channel of collectors, smugglers, and rogue historians. The journal, aged but legible, referenced a buried queen, a black ocean, a gate that should never be reopened. To Moreau, it was proof not of danger, but of legacy. Cleopatra was the last queen, and he would be the one to find her. Dr. Amira Rashad, by now living a reclusive life teaching at a small Cairo university, learned of the expedition not through academic channels, but from a panicked former student who had seen the permit list online. "Professor," the girl had whispered over the phone, "they're digging near the north pylon again." Amira froze. She hadn't returned to the site since the incident with Leo Durham, who had since vanished while on a solo dive off the coast of Heraklion. No body was recovered. Only his waterproof journal, found washed ashore, pages ink-streaked but containing one final scrawl. "She walked in my dream. She asked me if I remembered the smell of salt in my blood." Amira hung up and packed a bag. She was going back, not to discover but to stop them. Moreau's team struck stone on their fourth day. Cameras recorded the moment. Excited hands brushing away centuries of dirt and limestone to reveal what appeared to be the black basalt doors, still sealed, though cracked. Behind the camera, Moreau whispered to himself in Latin, the Queen waits." Though several team members protested, citing strange dreams and unexplained nausea near the shaft, Moreau pushed forward. Night fell, and with it came a rising wind from the sea, though the weather reports had called for stillness. The wind brought whispers. That night, one of the workers, a young Egyptian named Sami, wandered into the shaft alone and never returned. His body was later found curled beside the seal. His skin was damp. His eyes were gone. Still, Moreau persisted. By dawn, the basalt doors had been opened, and the air changed. Day 5, the team descended. Equipped with modern tech, LiDAR, drones, respirators, they entered the burial chamber. At first, it seemed ordinary by ancient standards. A central altar, reliefs on the wall, and at its heart, a closed sarcophagus. But the readings made no sense. Electromagnetic fields surged erratically. The air pressure dropped 20 degrees between the surface and the altar. Every camera feed flickered. Microphones captured strange, subsonic vibrations, like breath beneath earth. The sarcophagus emitted no decay, no scent, but heat radiated faintly from its edges. They opened it. Inside was nothing. No bones.
No gold.
Only dust. And a single item. A signet ring bearing the emblem of a coiled cobra and the inscription Vivit Regina sub undis. The queen lives beneath the waves. The team argued for hours. Some believed the tomb had already been looted. Others began murmuring about a hoax. But the seismic spike later that night, picked up as far as Alexandria's observatory, proved something had changed. Amira arrived at the dig site on the 6th day. What she found was a ruin of panic. The tents were abandoned. Moreau's equipment was smashed. His team was scattered, half in the hospital, the others missing entirely. She descended alone into the tomb. It had changed. The chamber's glyphs were glowing. Faintly but unmistakably. Not lit by any external source, but pulsing like veins in the walls. The sarcophagus was still open, but the dust inside it was gone. In its place, salt water. A thin pool of it perfectly still, despite the absence of wind. Amira turned and saw something scratched into the wall that hadn't been there before. New, desperate. She woke beneath the tide. She remembers Rome. That night, Amira dreamt of the same throne Lucilla once did. She walked through a city submerged. Not ancient Alexandria, but modern, flooded, her university sinking, streets filled with water that smelled of iron and ink. And on the throne of the drowned city sat Cleopatra. Her face shimmered. Her eyes were endless. She said no words, but opened her hand. In it, a Roman coin. On one side, the eagle. On the other, a woman's face eroded by sea. Amira woke choking on seawater. Following the events at Taposiris Magna, unexplained tidal surges began striking Egypt's northern coastline. Entire fishing villages near Abu Qir Bay reported seawater rising up through cracks in the ground. Seismologists documented patterns unlike any they'd seen. Pulses, not quakes. Emanating not from tectonic plates but from a point within the Mediterranean, directly offshore from the temple ruins. A research submarine sent to investigate reported structures beneath the seafloor. Enormous pillars.
Ruined plazas.
And something else, a throne-like formation, miles beneath the surface. It was as if an entire city slept beneath the water, beating like a heart. But before the submersible could capture more than 10 minutes of footage, it lost contact. Its last transmission came in Latin, auto-translated from its onboard AI interface, which had been running a test pattern. She remembers. She breathes again. Weeks later, strange symbols began appearing on beaches. Spirals, eyes, and serpents. Drawn in salt, not sand. They resisted the tide. Locals described them as burned into the shore. Satellite images confirmed their shapes matched the glyphs Amira had documented years ago within the sealed tomb. Worse still, people across Alexandria, particularly near ancient ruins, began reporting dreams. Always the same. A vast chamber beneath water. A woman in a black robe. A ring on her hand. And a voice that said, "The Nile no longer runs through land alone. It runs through memory. And memory is mine." Professor Moreau, the one who had breached the tomb, was found days later wandering the Cairo necropolis, barefoot and incoherent. He had aged visibly. His once black hair now stark white, skin pale, voice brittle. In the hospital, before dying of pulmonary edema without any medical explanation, he managed to whisper only a few sentences to Dr. Rashad, who had come to see him. She was never meant to die. She was sealed. The tomb, It was not for her. It was because of her. The veil is thinner now. We let her dream again. He died with his eyes wide open, pupils dilated, as though drowning. No water was found in his lungs. After Moreau's death, Amira took it upon herself to gather what little remained. The field notes, the original scroll from Marcus Calvus, Lucilla's journal fragments, and the archaeological footage. She attempted to present her findings in a closed symposium in Vienna. But halfway through her talk, the university's servers crashed. Backup copies of her video were corrupted. Several slides displayed glyphs no one had added, moving glyphs, animating on their own. Amira ended the lecture abruptly and returned to Cairo. She locked all materials in a vault beneath the Egyptian Museum, labeling them in 4 languages with the same phrase. Let the queen rest. Let her memory fade. Her sleep is the seal. 3 months later, a massive undersea current, never before observed, surged along the continental shelf near the Nile Delta. It was thick with silt, black as ink, and carried no marine life. Coastal sensors picked up low-frequency pulses, matching almost eerily the rhythm of a heartbeat. Across the Mediterranean, from Sicily to Crete, dreams began to converge. More and more people reported seeing Cleopatra, but not the regal queen of paintings and coins. This Cleopatra had skin like onyx, eyes like whirlpools, and she was always rising, always reaching. Dr. Amira Rashad disappeared in May 2025. Her apartment was found undisturbed, except for her notes, meticulously stacked on her desk. One item was missing, the ring. The same ring once buried with Cleopatra. The same ring found in the tomb. The same ring that appeared in Lucilla's dreams, in Moreau's confession, in the wet sand beneath the open sarcophagus. No one knows where it is now. But on the night Amira vanished, the moon over Alexandria turned red, and the sea rose 5 meters in a single hour.
No storm. No explanation.
Only silence, and the sound of weeping on the wind. The tomb of Cleopatra may never be found again. The temple has since been reburied by the earth, the shaft filled, the basalt doors lost. But her legend, her memory, endures, and somewhere beneath the Mediterranean, the queen waits, not dead, just dreaming, and dreaming is the first step to waking. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like the video, leave your theory in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into ancient mysteries and lost worlds. Until next time, stay curious.